RadioNOW 100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.
Hello, I'm Emily Metheny, your host. This week, I had a chance to talk with Claire Mauschbaugh. She's the Events and Communications Associate with Indiana Humanities, and we talked about the organization and their new initiative, Bookmark Indy. To start, I asked Claire to tell me more about the organization. So to start, Claire, can you tell us a little bit about Indiana Humanities?
Yeah, Indiana Humanities is a statewide nonprofit, and we like to say we encourage Hoosiers to read, to think, and to talk. And we do this through a variety of ways, including putting on our own public humanities programs throughout the state. We do a program called Chew on This, where we take people to restaurants and have conversations around the dinner table, to our newest project, Bookmark Indy, which is an exploration of Indianapolis through the eyes of writers. We also are a grant maker, so we give out grants to other nonprofits throughout the state to do public humanities programs in their communities. So libraries, schools, community centers, organizations along those lines we give them funds to do, reading discussion groups, to do exhibits, to do, talks in their community, conversations around certain topics in their community. So that's really the gist of what we do in Indiana by promoting the humanities.
Excellent. And so because Indiana Humanities is a statewide organization, nonprofit, these grants and these projects can be accessed by anyone in the state. So if they're visiting or if they're in a different region, right?
Correct. Yeah, definitely. Our grants are open to any organization that is based in Indiana for projects that are going to happen in Indiana. And then, our public programs, especially now, that a lot of them are virtual, are accessible by really anyone that has an internet connection. So, yeah, the answer is yes to that.
Excellent. And then you kind of touched on the virtual side with how COVID kind of changed how we interact with each other in person. How has that changed what Indiana Humanities has been doing in the past year?
Yeah, so it's changed what we've done a lot. Luckily, we were able to make a switch fairly quickly, and we've been able to move quite a few of our programs to a virtual setting or to something that we can send people in the mail. For example, we do a program called Campfires, where we take people out on a trail and read environmental literature and talk about place and what the future of Indiana is going to be. And this past summer, in the fall, we did a virtual campfire where we took out a 360-degree camera onto the trail and got footage from different spots along these trails that are not really accessible to the public normally. So we were able to do an online virtual experience where people could explore a different place that they wouldn't be able to access normally and have a conversation with other Hoosiers about topics that related to that place. For example, one, we talked a lot about glaciers, and another, we talked a lot about just the environment in general. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we've been able to do that. And then the other thing we've been able to do, we've been really fortunate to receive federal funds from the CARES Act, and we're also going to be receiving funds from the American Rescue Plan Act. And we've been able to distribute those funds to cultural organizations across the state to help relieve some of the burden that COVID has put on our cultural organizations.
Excellent. And Indiana Humanities also, you have programs that range from, if you have an interest in nature, to food with Chew on this. Mm-hmm. You also have one for STEM. Can you talk a little bit about Quantum Leap?
Yeah, so Quantum Leap is a program series that we did about 3-4 years ago. So we work at Indiana Humanities. We work in 2-year thematic initiatives because the humanities are so broad and so wide. There's so many things we could talk about. So we work in these themes to help focus our programming onto specific types of topics. So about 2 years ago, or I guess 4 years ago, we started Quantum Leap, which was the exploration of STEM and the humanities and how those intersect. And so we did a variety of things, from field trips to scientific places of inquiry that we talked about what are, like, you know, the ethics, the philosophy, the history behind those scientific endeavors. And then, you know, we gave out specific grants for those. We created a science book club that is still going on today called Books, Food, and Brains. That is where we read, you know, scientific literature, whether that be nonfiction or fiction, that just has some kind of scientific tie-in. And then we bring in, you know, scientists, researchers, experts to join us for those conversations about those books that can give us some different kind of light to the topic because they are experts in that field. So that program is still going on, so people can join that. It's online the last Tuesday of every month.
And if someone wants to see all the programs that Indiana Humanities is offering, can you give your website and where they can also find you on social media?
Yeah, so Indiana Humanities is online at www.indianahumanities.org, and then we are also on social media on all the platforms at IN Humanities.
Excellent. And is that the best way to stay up to date and to interact with the organization?
Definitely. I definitely encourage you to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. That's the best place to find the most up-to-date information. And you can also sign up for our e-newsletter at www.indianahumanities.org.
Excellent. And so kind of jumping over to Bookmark Indy. You kind of touched on it at the beginning of the conversation, but can you go a little more in detail about how this project got started and what people can start going out and doing and visiting?
Yeah, definitely. So we were so thankful to the Lilly Endowment that seeded this project with a grant. And then along the way, we've gotten many other supporters and sponsors for this project. It's been really exciting. But Bookmark Indy is a literary exploration of Indianapolis through the eyes of the writers that have called it home. So you are able to visit 19 different locations across Indianapolis that have inspired our writers, from the pyramids that inspired Adrienne Batika, who was our former state poet laureate, all the way down to Garfield Park, which has inspired Marguerite Young, and there is a mural of her down there, and Alan Helms, who wrote a memoir and talked about living in Garfield Park. So you're able to explore these 19 locations, the physical locations, and there's markers at all of them, but there's also a robust online experience that you're able to explore. So on each location, we have a variety of photography, videos, information about the writers and the place, and excerpts from their work that you're able to read. So at bookmarkindy.com, you can explore and learn more about our writers and about the place that we call home.
Excellent. And with these 19 writers, it includes like Kurt Vonnegut, John Green, Dan Wakefield, James Whitcomb Riley. Excellent.
Yeah. Yep. So there's a variety of writers, you know, living and deceased. And that's one of the most exciting parts for us, is being able to showcase the writers that are living here now and that are working here, and their amazing work.
Excellent. So, and this is available to everyone, correct?
Correct. Yep. So online at www.bookmarkindy.com, and we're going to have events through. Right now, we're going to have 19 weeks of events straight that people can join. Some will be virtual, some will be in person, some will be kind of just drop-in where you just come and pick something up. But those are also on www.bookmarkindy.com. And, this project will be going on for the next 2 to 3 years. So there will be other things going on in the future as well.
And people can stay up to date with all of that happening on your social media at IN Humanities.
Correct.
Excellent. And so if a teacher is listening, would they be able to access these materials and use them for class?
Definitely, yeah. We encourage teachers to use this content as much as they can And we are working on creating some field trip guides that teachers will be able to use for the next school year.
Excellent. And you kind of touched on some of the events coming up. What else is coming up for Indiana Humanities?
Yeah, so I definitely encourage everyone to check out our Bookmark Indy event. So on May 1st, we're going to be on Mass Ave. We're going to be placing out some Kurt Vonnegut books, so you can tune into social media to try to find a book that you can take home for yourself. And then there's going to be a variety of other things that are happening with Bookmark Indy, including pop-up science fiction poetry on May 15th on Monument Circle, to a celebration of Indiana Avenue that's going to happen in August. And then other things, just Indiana Humanities general things. We are going to be launching our newest thematic initiative on June 1st, which is going to be about the environment. So name to be announced on that one. So that's going to be, once that's announced, there's going to be lots more things happening.
And because it is April currently, and it is National Poetry Month, I do have a question for you about poetry.
Yeah.
So when it comes to national months where we celebrate and raise awareness and focus in on something, why do you think that there is a month dedicated specifically to poetry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think poetry specifically is a powerful medium of writing, because I think we saw this during the inauguration and the inaugural poem by Amanda Gorman, how poetry can move people in a way that is so particular to its form. And so I think there's a national month for poetry to celebrate that these people that are writers, but they're also artists and performers, and they bring all these different things together from the arts and the humanities, and are able to create beautiful work that just speaks very particularly to people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Claire, as we start to wrap up, is there anything you'd like to add about Bookmark Indy, about Indiana Humanities, or about art in general, art and liberal arts in general?
Yeah, so I think the one thing I didn't mention about Bookmark Indy is that there are a dozen original art pieces that were commissioned in response to writers and to their writing. So, for example, there's visual art that is in response to Alan Helms. There's a original poem that's in response to Booth Tarkington's The Magnificent Ambersons. So all those artistic responses from Hoosier artists are on bookmarkindy.com too. So there's visual art, there's performing art, lots to check out there.
Excellent. And people, as the weather gets warmer, they're going to be able to go out and visit all of these locations around Indy. Correct.
Yeah. So we encourage you to do that and post your pictures on social media with #BookmarkIndy, and your pictures can show up on our website, and we'll retweet them and repost them. So we encourage you to do that.
So it's a full experience from you enjoying and then you can appreciate and share that appreciation.
Correct. Yeah. And the other thing is we have on our website our creative prompts. So if you go to these places, you too can be inspired by Indianapolis and complete a creative prompt that will help you drive that creativity and create something.
Excellent, especially as the weather starts to get warmer, people are going out and about more. And
definitely.
It gives you a way to appreciate Indy another way.
Right. That's what we hope.
Excellent.
We think Indianapolis is a city that inspires creativity, and it's inspired these writers and these artists, and it can also inspire you.
Following the shootings at FedEx, as well as other recent shootings, I wanted to share some resources in a conversation with David Berman. David is the Vice President of Harm Reduction and Crisis Stabilization Services with Mental Health America of Indiana. David has been on the show before talking about mental health and suicide prevention, and for this conversation, I wanted to talk more in depth with him about grief and how we as individuals and a community can work through our emotions and the importance of why we need to do it. David, recently there was a mass shooting at FedEx, and I know locally in the community for Indianapolis, we're feeling it throughout.
Absolutely. This is, I think, any time there is any sort of mass shooting, it touches every one of us. Unfortunately, they feel like they're every other week anymore. And in some ways, we've become desensitized to them. But they affect us, whether we know it or not. It's interesting how often mass shootings are associated with mental illness. And most of the time, it has nothing to do with mental illness whatsoever. The large majority of individuals that have some sort of mental health disorder, large, overwhelming majority, are not violent at all, have never had any sort of violent behavior. And so one of the things we need to do is stop associating mass shootings with mental health disorder. However, we know that any sort of violence in general, whether we are the individuals that have been perpetrated against, we are the primary victims, or whether we are bystanders, or for first responders, or those that are in a location where violence occurs, there are long-lasting secondary trauma effects that can affect us that we may not even know about. And so we need to be, I think, aware as a society that whether violence occurs because of a mental health issue or not, and again, it rarely is mental health related, but whether violence occurs as a result or is the cause of potential mental health issues, violence affects us all. And when we see events like this, it's heartbreaking. And I can say on behalf of Mental Health America of Indiana, our deepest sympathies and our thoughts, our prayers, our condolences, our grief goes out to all of the victims and survivors and their friends and families and the FedEx employees and the general community in which FedEx is located.
And for our community members who are suffering with grief, especially for some of the younger victims who are under 20, and this might be the first person that they've lost a friend close to their age, how can we support those younger community members?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this may be the first time that they've ever lost someone, not a grandparent, nobody that they know. Maybe a pet has died, but it's very different. So, the first thing that we should do is be straightforward and honest. Use simple, clear words, especially with younger children. Make sure that we use age-appropriate words and be caring about it. Active listening, as we talked about, talk about in general as far as mental health goes, active listening and comfort. Everyone reacts differently, learning that a loved one or someone that they're close to has died. Some individuals cry, some ask questions, some don't seem to react at all, and that's totally okay. But give reassurance, put emotions into words. So often we don't understand how we're feeling. How can we expect our kids and young people to understand? Mm-hmm. What does depressed mean? What does I'm feeling anxious? What do these words mean, as opposed to being able to translate those words into, or those emotions into actual words, rather than just a defined feeling? Telling people what to expect. Again, especially younger children, what might happen as far as a funeral goes, or memorial service, or what might they expect at this point? Talking about them, talking about funerals, talking about the rituals. When it's someone that's an immediate family member, giving kids, whether they're teens, whether they're younger kids, some sort of role, something to do in the process, so they feel like they're an active part of what's going on. And And then simple things like, helping individuals remember the person, with younger kids, again, drawing a picture, writing a poem or a story about the person that they lost. And then probably most of all, time, giving people time. This applies to adults, this applies to teenagers, young adults, small kids. Time heals all wounds, and it doesn't always heal all wounds, but it makes it easier. And sometimes just giving time and space is the best thing that we can do.
Can I have you give a couple quick resources people can use to kind of start to go through the grief process?
So again, I think the best way to find resources sometimes is on the web. The Indiana Department of Health has some bereavement resources on there. The Be Well Indiana website, SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health arm of Health and Human Services, the federal arm of mental health, has a ton of resources on their site. And I would also recommend calling 211, whether it's the community navigators or an individual with the Be Well Crisis Helpline. On the Be Well Crisis Helpline, 24/7 trained crisis counselors that will talk to you about grief anonymously as many times as you want to call for as long as you want to call. Or again, they can just provide a list of resources. They probably have one of the best repositories of resources for mental health or community-based resources that we have in the state.
For the people who are part of the community who aren't directly related to one of the victims and they're feeling anxious and they're trying to work through their feelings, it's okay for them to be working through their feelings, right?
Absolutely.
They're able to process this because it is something traumatic that happened in our community.
Absolutely. And it's okay to feel depressed. We don't want individuals to have symptoms related to clinical depression. And typically what defines that is a 2-week or more period of sadness, of depression so intense that it's debilitating and prohibits us from living our life. But it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel depressed. Grief is normal. We lose somebody, whether it's someone that we know that's close to us, or whether, as you said, a community member who is really just feeling the effects. That's totally normal. Having feelings, experiencing grief, being sad is absolutely totally normal. You made a good point, though, in that one of the key factors that you had mentioned is working through your feelings. If you are self-aware, if you know how you're feeling and you know why you're feeling it, you're probably going to be just fine without any sort of therapeutic intervention. I can tell you that there are all sorts of activities that I have heard and that I believe are already or have occurred in the community around the location of FedEx, in the Hendricks County community, the Plainfield community. I would, again, going back to Google, recommend that if you want to do something where you feel like you're a part of something bigger, Google and see what's going on in the community. There are churches, there are organizations, there are candlelight vigils, there are all sorts of events that are going on, that have gone on, that will be going on in that community that individuals can be a part of. And sometimes just being part of something bigger than they are with people who are going through the same thing is tremendously beneficial.
And as we wrap up, David, is there anything else you'd like to add about grief or just taking care of your community?
Again, grief is normal. Grief is totally normal. And experiencing grief is a process, and it can take a very long time. What we want to be careful of is that it doesn't transition into that deep, debilitating depression. And with grief, oftentimes it's other people that we need to take care of us because we're in a state where we're really not able to think clearly sometimes. And we need those other folks to make sure that we are eating the right way, and we're getting exercise, and we're engaging with people. We're not feeling like we're alone. So again, totally normal. And then self-care. We're getting into spring. Just get outside, start focusing on, or continue focusing on the things that make you happy, the things that you enjoy doing. It's a great preventative way to ensure that when things come along like this, that we have that resilience. We all go through things. Resiliency is what helps us push through to the other side. And self-care, having that practice of self-care is a good place to start.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, David.
Oh, you're very welcome, Emily.
For more resources and more conversations about mental health, you can visit our mental health tab or search Indy's Connection on RadioNOW's website, which is radionowindy.com. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, comments, or topics you'd like to hear more about, email me at emetheny, that's EMETHENY, at radio-one.com. Or you can message me on Twitter at EmilyDoesVideo. Please join me again next week as I talk more with David Berman about mental health. Until then, have a great week.
Radio Now 100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.